Thank you and good evening. You can hear me okay at the back? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Before moving to agenda item 1, I'd like to welcome the speakers we have this evening, but remind you this is a meeting in which you are invited as a public, but it's not a public meeting. And when invited to speak, please could you keep to your allotted time. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, so if you hear the fire alarm go off, please leave by the nearest exit to you, and we meet by the bandstand in the centre of Horsham. May I remind members and the public to turn your phones to silent or turn the phones off. And when speaking, please could you make sure you turn the microphone on, and when you finish, turn the microphone off. When we are voting, please can you raise your arm clearly so that we can get an accurate account of how people have voted. Thank you. And before we start the agenda fully, I'd like to ask the officers to introduce themselves.
Jason Hawkes, Principal Planning Officer.
Matthew Porter, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Laurel Tilbury, Committees Officer.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence. We have Councillors Paul Clark, Victoria Finnegan, Alan Manton, Nicholas Marks, John Milne, Josh Potts, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Minutes from the previous meeting. Does anyone want to raise anything regarding the minutes, or can I take them as agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Announcements. I don't have any announcements myself, and there are no announcements from the Chief Executive. And I've jumped ahead of myself, thank you. Declaration of members' interests. Are there any declarations at all? No? Okay, thank you. Getting back onto the agenda. There are no announcements from myself or from the Chief Executive. So moving ahead to the appeals, agenda item number 5. Any comments regarding the appeals that are in the committee pack? No? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then to the first application this evening, which is DC 230701, which is Old Clayton Boarding Kennels, Storrington Road, Washington. I invite the officer to make the presentation.
Right, good evening, members. This proposal is for a 60-bed care home and 8 retirement bungalows, widened site access. As shown on the slide, the site is between Storrington and Washington, outside of the built-up area boundary, but adjacent to Milford Grange Housing Estate. The application is returned to committee for 2 reasons. The first is the applicant is proposing a different affordable housing offer to that in June 2023. And the second is that the applicant submitted evidence to address the need for a sequential test for flooding. And accordingly, so this presentation focuses on these new material considerations rather than matters that members carefully considered back in June when they resolved to approve the application. So the site's brownfield. It's occupied by kennel buildings and structures. You have Old Clayton, which is a Grade 2 listed building outside of the application site to the south. It's marked yellow on the slide. Just to familiarity, this is the proposed site layout, and you have certain elevations. So the care home is set at the rear of the site with the bungalows arranged in the courtyard. So detailed on this slide is the updated affordable housing offer. This offer is explained at paragraph 1.5, an associated section of the committee report. It's a result of officer negotiations in lieu of the 6 care bed spaces, which West Sussex didn't wish to take up. So the housing team at the council supports the financial contribution in lieu of the on-site provision. as the units being offered have been a difficult let, and also it's their preference to have the 106 funding to use for proposed build-out units or elsewhere. So, as this slide shows, the site is shown in Environment Agency mapping at medium risk along the west boundary. And then alongside that, the applicants undertaken their own modelling shown, and it shows only small isolated areas of flooding no greater than 300 millimetres on the site. So there will be no flooding within the proposed buildings. The emergency access is possible in all flood events up to and including 1 in 100 year plus climate change allowance. The local Lee Flood Authority has accepted the modelling outcomes, and given these, your officers consider that the sequential test is not required to be undertaken. And then alongside this exercise, the applicants refined the surface water drainage strategy, so resolving the Flood Authority objection back in June 2023. You'll note from the report that Washington Parish have repeated their view that the scheme conflicts with their neighbourhood plan. Obviously, you've heard and accepted back in June the officer's advice that the proposal is in compliance with the neighbourhood plan. There is no conflict with the neighbourhood plan, so therefore the paragraph 14 of the MPPF isn't engaged, and also policy 42 of the emerging local plan can only be given limited weight at this stage. So bringing together all of these issues and still applying the presumption of sustainable development, given the updated proposal, the proposal is still regarded as compliant with the development plan as recommended with the updated condition list set out in the committee report, subject to some fine cross-referencing to the condition list, given that we've now included the recommendation from the Flood Authority on additional conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first speaker this evening, which is John Bray from Highwood Group, and I'll remind you, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bray. I'm the planning manager at Highwood with the applicants. Throughout the course of the application, we've sought to work with all the parties to address many of the complex matters that have been raised to try and achieve what we hope to be a high quality development of which we can all be proud. We were grateful for this committee's resolution to grant permission in June of last year and for acknowledging that this scheme was worthy of your approval. As an SME company, we aim to progress the construction of our schemes quickly upon receiving any permission, in this case with our care home operator partners Barchester. While we've encountered delays and complications on this application from the outset, due mostly to matters beyond our control, we've consistently tried to react positively and find solutions. So most recently, this has been regarding the Section 106 and the affordable housing contribution, which we've sought an agreeable outcome that meets the policy requirements and which benefits the district. And on drainage, as touched on by Matthew, we've provided an upgraded scheme that satisfies the lead local flood authority, who have confirmed they have no objection on this surface water issue, subject to the conditions. So we commend your officers' thorough report and their conclusions once more. They've conducted a comprehensive planning assessment and correctly concluded that the scheme accords with the development plan and with any benefits outweighing potential harms. The primary benefit being the redevelopment of a brownfield site to address the critical unmet need for specialist care beds and housing for older people in accordance with the MPPF and your development plan policies. So we therefore urge members to again support the officer's recommendations this evening and to permit this much needed scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matthew, anything come back? No. Okay, I invite the local ward members, starting with Councillor Beard. Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't have much to say now, as our local member concerns around the extra traffic, difficulty of pedestrian access to Storrington by the
Sorry,
pedestrian access.
could you just speak a little closer to the microphone?
Yeah, sorry, I need
Apologies.
to move it.
Slightly
Okay,
deaf,
I'll start
so-
again. I don't have much to say right now, as our local members' concerns have already been expressed around the extra traffic, the difficulty of pedestrian access to Storrington via narrow pavements on the A283 and lack of sufficient public transport, as well as it being contrary to the neighbourhood plan, have all been documented when the application came to committee last year. We understand that permission has been given already, so we'll listen to the debate about the proposed variations and ask questions as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg? No? Okay. Open it to other members wishing to make any comments on this particular application. No? Okay. Sorry. In that case, I will go to a vote on this particular. Sorry, Councillor Fisher, yes.
So I just wonder if I could have a final word, if we're not going to have a debate, just to say one further thing, if that's possible.
Yes, I'll
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you to Matthew Porter for his comprehensive response via email around our concerns about the requirement or lack of to provide affordable care places, and it was very useful. I do have concerns about whether the amount still represents good value for taxpayers, but I do accept the officer's assurances. And more generally, as I said before, around the impact of the old Clayton development on the already strained road and social infrastructure in place for Storrington Washington residents. So I've got a question, which is, as such, I'd like to know how, as one of the three Storrington Washington members, we can secure the 245,000 S106 money, which is being promised today, is earmarked entirely for use in projects identified by both Storrington and Sutherlandton parishes and Washington parishes as being directly beneficial to their parishioners.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, if you want to come back on that one.
Yep, so the approach that we as officers are taking with support from the housing team is that because the waiting list for Storrington is tailored towards that community, the greater benefit of district-wide for the provision is there to avoid having a ring fencing. Obviously, what we're trying to do is to look at where we can best spend this in the reality of a project that can be realised within the 5 years that we have before any payment can be has to be repaid back to the applicant if it hasn't been spent. So the danger of ring fencing something to an area which doesn't have a project that's going to manifest itself within 5 years is we lose the money. So the better approach in our view is to pool that money to a scheme that's been delivered across the district.
Just to add to that, it's quite unusual to ring fence affordable housing money to particular areas of the district, because obviously, you know, as a council, we look at affordable housing needs across the district as a whole, and quite often, you know, pots of money are received from various developments to bring forward bigger schemes of affordable housing, or to support registered providers with grants, etc., to help them deliver more or switch the tenure and things like that. So I think it's our view that, you know, in terms of Section 106 provision, we should have it to be spent in the district as a whole, and then in any decisions on where that should be best spent should sit with, you know, the relevant PDAG, the relevant cabinet members, and discussion with our housing team rather than restrict something which may mean it's not delivered in the best interests of the district as a whole, or there is a real risk, bearing in mind, you know, how long a project lead-in time is that the money's not spent and the developers can reclaim it, because, you know, Section 106 is reasonably have a time limit on when it must be spent. So it is a decision members can make, but officers are expressing the risks in doing that. And obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that a more comprehensive affordable housing scheme can be delivered, which meets the wider benefits of the whole district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor van der Burg, I'll come to you next.
It's just a point of clarity, really. The application has to be commenced within 3 years. Yes? Does that commit the money to be spent? Or does the money get, if they took another 5 years to build it, how does that work? And what's the 5-year time frame here? Is it commencement or when the money's spent?
So we've got 3 instalments, and it's spread across stages of the commencement and the occupation. So the repayments 5-year will be at the point of the trigger of each of the instalments. So it will be staggered across. So
it'll be 5 years from when we get the money.
yeah, so but basically 5 years from when we get the money at each of the instalments.
Thank you. Councillor Bainham.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment in response to Councillor Fisher's remarks there. I mean, I understand it's the general principle that 106 money goes to the local community as far as possible, but I'm not aware of any actual position where we have 106 money specifically legally ring-fenced. I could be corrected, but I'm pretty sure we don't have any such monies at this time, and that would be a new precedent for the way the council offices runs its finances.
Thank you. Councillor Circus, and I'll come to Councillor Fisher.
I hear what Councillor Bainham says, which is undoubtedly true, but the question is, can we do it? Are we legally entitled to do it if we wish to do so? Thank you.
It's my view that you can do it. I guess you have to think, is that reasonable and necessary? But you know, it is something members can choose to do if you think that is fundamental to the acceptability of the scheme. I think in terms of Section 106, it's difficult because we don't really, the only thing we use Section 106 for nowadays is affordable housing. You know, back when we used to use it for everything before SIL, it was ring fenced for certain uses like community uses, but I can't recall an occasion where it was ring fenced for affordable housing. As far as I'm aware, most, if not all, of the Section 106 affordable housing we have is required as the district as a whole. For instance, you know, we got a fair bit from the countryside development, which we used in Horsham town, for instance. So I think we have to recognise it's not standard practice to ring fence affordable housing contributions to a very specific area of the district for the reasons that I've already outlined. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Knoll. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Fisher, sorry. Councillor Knoll first, then I thought you were in conversation.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a comment and has no basis at all in planning. But I appreciate all the hard work that our planning officers have done for this. I appreciate the amount of money that developers are going to contribute, and I'm going to support this motion. However, I regard it as a blot on the landscape in its position on the corner of the national park, and I'll kick myself every time I drive past it, which is quite frequently, because I'm going to vote for it, but I don't like it, And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher.
So my view is that, and thank you to Councillor Circus for clarifying that we could do this, that this is, as Councillor Knoll says, going to be a significant impact to Storrington and Washington residents, particularly in terms of all sorts of impacts, as we've already discussed. And so therefore I do really strongly feel that that £245,000 should be ring-fenced for the community as some form of compensation. And then referring to policy 18, it does say large-scale continuing care retirement communities will be supported in appropriate locations, blah, blah, blah. A, provide accommodation for a full range of needs, including care provision. B, include affordable provision to meet identified local needs, or where this is not possible, provide an appropriate commuted sum in lieu of side units. And C, include appropriate services and facilities, including transport, to meet the needs of residents, staff, and which contributes to the wider economy. So on that basis, I would like to either propose a motion or an amendment that that is the purpose for this funding and that it goes to the community of Storrington and Washington. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. That is a decision members are entitled to make. If you feel that that money should be ring fenced, then that is a decision you're entitled to make. As I said, I would caution that is the best use of the money in terms of the district as a whole and what it could actually be spent on within a 5-year period. There is Abbey Court, which I understand that there are plans to look at that, but have to bear in mind lead-in time for projects at the council are a number of years. So I think there is a risk. It's not necessarily going to result in net gain in affordable housing within the parish, whereas if it was part of a wider pot across the district, it perhaps could be used more effectively, but that is a decision you're entitled to make, members, and as long as you're aware of that, then that's your decision. Thank you.
So I just want to clarify something. I'll come to you both in a moment. Thank you. Councillor Circus, I think you were first, and I'll come back to Claudia. Councillor Fisher, sorry, and then yourself, Councillor Dennis. Councillor Circus.
I'm minded to support this, and if it helps, I'm happy to second it. I think the point that's been made is a perfectly valid one. As my colleague, Councillor Noel, said, we should never have given permission for this development. It's caused a great deal of unhappiness to many people in Storrington and Washington. It's felt that this is a blot on the landscape, that it is potentially undermining the semi-rural nature of the Washington Road. And I think that the least the people of Storrington and Washington can expect is this small crumb of comfort that this money will be ring-fenced for the benefit of the 3 parishes, Storrington and Sullington, of course, and the parish of Washington. So if you want to put me down as seconding the motion, I'm quite happy to go down as such.
We'll come to that in a moment, Councillor Circus, but Councillor Fisher.
I just wanted to have a clarification, but I think my colleague has cleared it up, so I think
Okay.
it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll come to you both in a moment. Councillor Dennis, I think you were before.
Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm minded in the same way that Councillor Circus is as well to move along with himself. The only other comment I have is around the transport plan statement and around parking. Having recently been to the opening of another care home in Sayers Common, which is just into mid-Sussex in the last few weeks, my immediate concern was the number of parking spaces that were available. And I see that there's 31 parking spaces, and that appears to be for the residents and for staff as well. And I think the likelihood is that we'll end up with dispersion of cars all around that particular area, particularly onto the new parking, into the lanes themselves, and that is of concern to me. I don't think the tax-free bike or equipment really is going to sort of wing it on rainy, wintry days.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Bainham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a suggestion. Perhaps would it be in order to have two motions, one on the recommendations as put forward by the officers, and a separate motion on the ring fence issue, which is not to do with the, I think, the specifics of this particular development. So would it be possible to have two? Would anybody object to that?
I think if the first motion fails, then we'll come back to the second one. I don't think we can have two motions at the same time. So we'll park that in a moment. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor, but Councillor Trollope.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be curious to know the exact proportion between C2 and C3 residences that are being planned. If it is mainly C2, which I take to mean assisted living, whereas I take C3 to be independent living. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just thinking if it's mainly C2, then they're probably, like my mother, past the age of being able to drive. And I do wonder how many of the residents would therefore own a car. As I said, it's sort of an open question. I'm not sure who can answer.
So just to clarify, the care home is a conventional care home, it's C2. The bungalows are C3, but they are tailored towards elderly occupation by the legal agreement, and also the design of it is wheelchair accessible.
So the people moving in, roughly what percentage will be assisted living as opposed to independent living, roughly?
So because it's C2 as a generic planning use, we wouldn't interrogate to know what's close care or what is more generally able people, because as long as they bracket within the C2, that's sufficient.
Okay. And I suppose, sorry, just one very quick point is in terms of the reservation of money for Storrington. My thoughts is perhaps we should instead ring fence it for issues to do with the elderly in our district, rather than, because I take the officer's point where it might not be needed in Storrington, it might be needed elsewhere. But I think at least if this is particularly helping our elderly, then maybe that's where we could ring fence some money, just as a separate idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lambert, I think you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wondered, can we not have the ring fencing of the 106 with all into the one with the planning permission? If it's approved, that happens.
Yeah, that's what we would be proposing. Any final questions before we go to the vote on this? With the Councillor van der Burg.
If I may, can we just be absolutely clear? The money that we're talking about here is specifically for affordable housing, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not to do with infrastructure or traffic or anything else, it's to do with affordable housing.
That's what we're debating today. There are other provisions within the legal agreement that was secured back in June.
But just to be clear, that and then the cautionary note here is there are 1,000 homes due to be built in Southwater. If they want to ring fence that money, you need to be a little bit careful of the precedent you set, I would suggest.
Just one moment. Right, Councillor Fisher.
Yes, so just quoting policy 18, it does say include appropriate services and facilities, including transport. So could it not be used for that as well?
No, that transport issues and matters were debated and considered by members in June. We're not here to revisit it today. We're just looking at the new material consideration, which is the updated affordable housing offer.
So, one last question, Councillor Dennis.
It's a question around a comment, I suppose. If you think about why this money has arisen as a Section 106, it's because West Sussex relinquished 6 care beds because they'll actually go about it in a different fashion. So under policy 42, which is around supporting retirement housing, etc., should this money not actually just go to affordable housing, but it should go to housing for the elderly, specific housing for the elderly, not necessarily care homes, but supported housing or extra care in the area.
I think that's the original intention, and that's why we were seeking affordable housing units as part of the care home, which would be managed by the county. Us as a district council don't manage a list for the elderly. We have a general housing, affordable housing needs list, and so I think I recognise your point, Councillor Dennis, and that's what we did seek to secure, but unfortunately that wasn't successful, which is why the alternative offer on the table is to provide for general affordable housing. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Fisher, could you repeat your motion so that we can capture that, please? I think it's to ring fence the...
Just 1 second. I propose that we secure the 245,000 S106 money to be earmarked entirely for affordable housing projects in Storrington and Sullington parishes, as well as Washington parishes. So it's directly beneficial to their parishioners.
It's ring fenced. Okay. To summarise then, you want the money that's been put forward to be ring fenced for affordable housing within Storrington, Sullington and Washington. Is that correct? Okay. So the vote therefore is the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and completion of the Section 106 legal agreement that ring fences the money for earmarked for affordable housing within Storrington, Sullington and Washington. Is that correct? Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So the vote here is... Yeah, and Councillor Circus, you're happy to second that still?
Indeed I am, Chairman.
Thank you. Therefore, can I ask you to vote all those in favour of the recommendation to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and completion of a Section 106 legal agreement with the money earmarked for affordable housing within Southwater, Sullington. No, sorry, apologies. I tried, just see if you were still awake, Councillor Circus. In Storrington, Sullington and Washington. Okay, all those in favour?
That is 11 for.
All those against?
And 4 against.
Any abstentions? No. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7. This is DC 240697, Honeypots, Spinney Lane, West Chiltington. Could I ask the officer to make their presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's put this, Okay, so application relates to Honey Pot's Spiny Lane, I think it's Spiny Lane, which is a detached dwelling within the built-up area of West Chiltern. Proposal is to replace an existing detached garage and outbuilding to the northern boundary of the site with a two-storey extension. So this follows a previous extant permission for a similar extension. I've shown here the site highlighted in red, and I've highlighted the outbuilding here with the blue arrow to the northern boundary. So this photo shows the detached garage with its got some outbuildings attached to it, which is taken to the, you can see it from the front there and from the rear. So here we see the existing house. So in the top left corner, you can see the garage, and this is where the extension is to propose, and there'll be a linked extension to the existing house. You can see that this is quite a big house, has already been extended with ample space set around it. So this shows the dwelling in relation to the West Chiltern Lanes conservation area, which I've shown hatched here in the blue. You can see that the house is not within the conservation area itself, but it is surrounded by the conservation area, and therefore any development here is, we have to assess the impact on the setting of the conservation area. The West Chiltern Lanes conservation area is known for its Wells cottages and has been recently made. The house itself is not a Wells cottage, but you can see here that the adjacent house to the north, Willow Cottage, is classed as a Wells cottage. So this shows the existing layout of the building. The outbuildings are shown there, which is to replace just the side of the dwelling to the north. These are existing elevations of the building, which has already been extended, and you can see it's already quite a substantial sized dwelling. So here we see the block plan showing the proposed extension in place. The extension is set adjacent to the northern boundary, as already said. Councillors will note that the Conservation Officer has commented that the proposed extension will not be conspicuous and will not obscure or compete with the neighbouring historic buildings. The impact on the adjacent heritage assets is therefore considered acceptable. Also, the extension, as you can see, is set at a suitable distance from the boundary and from adjacent properties, and that it won't result in a significant impact on the amenity of adjacent properties. Sorry, just move there. So this is the proposed layout of the extension. You can see here it's linked to the main building and will be an ancillary accommodation with a bedroom, office and playroom. As stated, the application is resubmission of an approved application which could be implemented. This is an amended scheme. This shows the layout of the approved application. You can see the layout is very similar to that with some minor changes. If I go back, you can see that the current scheme makes it slightly larger and slightly longer. It still has it's very similar, and the layout still has the link extension. So this is the elevations of the approved extension, which has this kind of cat slide barn hipped roof, and you can see the link to the main building there. And this is the proposed elevations of the current scheme. So you can see again, they're very similar. The main difference is the extension for the current scheme would increase its width by 0.8 metres, increase its depth by 1 metre, and slightly increase the overall height. So the current scheme is for a slightly larger extension than approved. Design of the extension is largely the same, with a barn hipped roof for similar materials. And you can see here that a garage door previously proposed, we show that, has now been removed from the current scheme. So overall, taking into account the lack of harm to the appearance of the dwelling, surrounding area, and the conservation area, and impact on adjacent properties, the scheme is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I invite Councillor Bob Guster, West Chiltern Parish Council, to speak, and you have 5 minutes.
Before I start, Mr. Chairman, could I ask the officer to put the block plan on the screen, please? Thank you. Thank you very much for extending the time to listen to me. West Chiltern Parish Council takes no pleasure in objecting to planning applications. However, when they think the unique ambience of the village is threatened, then we feel we have no choice. West Chiltern Planning Committee objected to the application DC 24 0697 on a number of grounds. This building was originally a bungalow and has been subject to 6 previous successful planning applications, creating in a number of increments a much larger structure. Bungalows are in short supply in West Chorltington and provide an opportunity for downsizing of the elderly population, often single people. So we do like to resist the change of bungalows into much larger, and in this case, incredibly larger buildings. As you will see, the site is adjacent and almost wedged into the newly Horsham District Council designated conservation area, which is for the historic Wells cottages. The double-storey nature of this application, replacing a single-storey garage and associated buildings, will dominate the scene and overshadow Willow Cottage, which is a Wells cottage inside the conservation area. The development on a relatively small plot close to the boundary with Willow Cottage is overbearing and represents an overdevelopment of this site. It is therefore in conflict with your policies 32, 33 and 34 of the Horsham District Planning Framework. The application also raises a concern for the Parish Council with regard to the implementation of conditions. The planning officers, when giving planning permission, insist on conditions. As part of their approval, however, history shows that these conditions are sometimes ignored by the applicant, and the variation is later accepted by the planners. This is of particular concern to West Chorltington with the growth of Airbnbs on an unsuitable site. In this application, condition 4 is that the development shall be occupied solely for the purposes ancillary to the occupation and enjoyment of the residents of honeypots. The future establishment of an independent unit of occupation would give rise to an over-intensive use of this site. Should you be minded to approve this application, will you, the committee, reinforce this condition at this meeting? I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, in terms of the impact on the conservation area, we have consulted our conservation officer for the impact on the relatively newly formed conservation area here. And as you see in the report, he's satisfied that the impact is acceptable. So we've given that weight in our determination of the impact on the setting of the conservation area and the Wells cottage adjacent there, taken into account his professional views. The application before you is for an extension to the dwelling, and it is linked. So it's been assessed on that basis. And the condition there is to ensure that it is used as ancillary accommodation and not as a separate dwelling. And so that's the application before you. And if it came to light that it was being used as a separate dwelling, it would be subject to enforcement proceedings.
Just to add to that, councillors, is obviously we do need to be mindful of the extant permission. So there is already a permission in place for an extension, which my colleague has outlined is similar. I understand this was granted last year, and so that could be implemented, imminently. And so I think we have to recognise that that's already been granted, and really, we need to consider what are the differences, because that impact, has already been granted. So is the kind of slight increase in size sufficient for members to now warrant a refusal, or is that acceptable? I think the consent already granted is a significant material consideration that members need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward members. Councillor Circus.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have to say, I was so enthusiastic in supporting the establishment of a conservation area that I didn't pay enough attention, if I may say so, to the properties that were included and the properties that were excluded. You'll see, if you'll remember, there was a change of focus on this. It started as the Wells Cottages conservation area, being about principally, wholly in fact, the conservation of the Wells Cottages. Then it was pointed out that many of these cottages had been expanded and developed, and also I made the point that what was important was to protect the character of the lanes themselves. That was the important thing to preserve, and not get too hung up on preserving Wells Cottages per se. So the name of the conservation area was changed to the West Chiltington Lanes Conservation Area. And that should have involved a slight change of focus, because if you look at the roads, I'm thinking of my own road, which is Westwood Lane, there are a number of properties that are not Wells Cottages. But nevertheless, they have not been excluded from the conservation area. Given that change of focus with the conservation area, looking at it now, it seems completely illogical that honeypots was excluded ultimately from the conservation area, because it's surrounded by Wells Cottages. And I think this is a hangover from the early days of working on the conservation area, where we were focused totally on Wells Cottages rather than the character of the lanes. But to use an expression, we are where we are. Although I think it might not be a bad idea when this conservation area is reviewed to have a look at this, because I genuinely think this is an anomaly when you consider other properties that are covered by the conservation area, and this one isn't. It's illogical that Spinney Lane, the whole of Spinney Lane, apart from honeypots, is in the conservation area. Now, turning to where we are, I find it very difficult to oppose this application for the reasons which have been stated. First of all, we have an existing permission, which, as Emma Parks quite rightly says, could mean that they could start work and fulfil. They could construct according to that permission here and now. It is only slightly larger. There are no neighbour objections. Well, living in West Chiltington, I can tell you that if people put up so much as a shed that people don't like, you get objections. And I'm sure the officers know this. They object freely if they don't like something. There are no objections from any neighbouring properties, which I think is instructive. There have been 6 previous successful applications. The chairman of the parish council says, well, you know, it started as a bungalow and maybe it should have stayed as a bungalow. But frankly, that's a horse that's bolted. It's not a bungalow and hasn't been for some time. I therefore feel that in the circumstances, I can't reasonably object to this application. But I remember another property in Sunset Lane, which is just round the corner, years ago, where I managed to get the committee to agree to an informative, which went on the file to say that in the view of the committee, now I know what the officers are going to say, there are limitations in the power and effectiveness of informatives. But we got an informative in that case to say that the committee felt that the development of the site, because it similarly had had a number of applications over the years, had reached its full potential. The suggestion being that the council would not possibly look favourably on a further application. Now, we did it in that case. It was a property called Romany in Sunset Lane. I'm presuming because we've done it before, we could do it again. And so I'm going to ask, therefore, whether anything's changed which would preclude an informative to that effect. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Serkis. You know, members can add an informative if you feel that's reasonable to do so. It wouldn't carry any weight in decision making, and I think we need to be mindful of concerns around predetermination of any future application, which should be assessed on its own merits. So I think I wouldn't recommend it. If they've submitted a subsequent application and it was refused, that they potentially could say, well, you'd already look at this informative, you'd already predetermined your decision. So I would caution against it, but ultimately that's your decision, members. And if you feel that's a reasonable way forward, then that's something that can be added. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dennis, did you want to say anything?
Sorry, I had put my finger down on the button or waved and I was
Could I just
taken
ask
aback. I was
you to
busy
speak a
having
little? Could I just ask you to speak a little closer to the microphone,
Oh,
please?
sorry.
Thank you,
I
sorry.
was just checking the access on High Potts, because one thing I couldn't spot was where the access was in and out. But I have to say, I completely, I concur with my fellow ward councillor. As uncomfortable as it is, I can't find a reason to vote against it, unfortunately. And as far as the conditions are concerned, apart from an individual reporting them, I just don't know what else you could actually do. And obviously, if they start using it for commercial purposes, then do you get them to pull it down? That's not something I'm aware of. Yeah, thank you. That's all we have to say.
Thank you.
So I believe the access is shown here, the red edge, because they've shown it to the nearest highway. So you can see now where it joins up to Bugmead Lane on this drawing here.
Councillor Knoll.
This is shared access we're talking about, are we? It's single access to Honeypot.
Honeypots.
I believe it is a shared access, yes. But, I'm not familiar with the site, but yeah, it definitely looks like it is shared access there.
Any other comments? No? Okay.
Therefore, that an informative be put on the file. It didn't cause a problem last time with the property. Romany in Sunset Lane. There have been 6 previous applications. This presumably is the 7th. I think in the circumstances, an informative along the lines I suggested is appropriate, and I would like to propose it, see whether I get support. And it would be that the committee feels that the development of this site has reached its full potential. Thank you, Chairman.
Just want to ask something of the head of development. Okay, councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to second Councillor Serkis's motion, particularly in view of the fact there's been 6 previous applications, and I think it's very important that regulatory condition number 4 is seen by the applicant as being a very serious condition, and that this proposal will just enforce that. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll, sorry, can I just clarify, is your comment in relation to the enforceability of condition 4, but saying that it needs to be complied with, or are you suggesting that anything further is added? Obviously, from an officer's point of view, we feel condition 4 is sufficient and enforceable and is a condition we would impose on developments such as this. Obviously, if that's breached and there's evidence, we can consider whether we pursue enforcement action. So officers don't feel anything additional is needed, but I just wanted to clarify your comment. Thank you.
Yes, I understand that, and I'll withdraw that part of my comment and second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, I've just taken some advice on this, and the advice is that the informative is dealt with separately, and the motion that we have is the committee feels that the development of the site has reached its full potential, and that is the informative being put forward, and it's been seconded by Councillor Knoll, I believe. Is that correct? Therefore, we would have a vote on that proposal. That is informative, and the committee feels that the development of the site has reached its full potential. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, I missed your arm. Sorry, Councillor Maiden.
Just before we go to a vote, and I've got a lot of sympathy with the thinking behind the proposal, but I am pretty concerned about the comments that Emma's made about predetermination in any future planning application, because if we were to refuse one on the basis and it was brought to an appeal, I think the appellant might have good grounds on grounds of predetermination. So I'm just wary of that.
Councillor Fisher.
I wonder if that motion could be amended to say the committee feels that this has reached its full development potential. However, any further applications will be considered with an open mind. So at least it's there, but it's still covering that point.
Sorry, that wasn't to the motion that was put forward, and one would hope one would have an open mind without actually having to put it in the document. So that
I'm not convinced that this amounts to predetermination, because what we know is that it's perfectly acceptable, for example, to say that you're minded to take a view in the planning committee, minded to take a view, or that's the way you're thought. And that's essentially what we're doing. We're saying that the committee, as of now, feels that the development of this site has reached its full potential. That does not, that means the committee would not be minded, but minded is not the same as predetermination. We know that's true as far as individuals are concerned. That must be true as far as...
Your motion, Councillor Serkis, the committee feels the development of the site has reached its full potential.
Yes.
Not may have reached its full potential, or might have reached it. It said has reached its full potential.
This committee feels, the word feels is important. Yeah.
That it's reached its full potential.
Well, I've provided my opinion. The motion has been put forward, and members can vote as they see fit. Thank you.
One last point before we go to the vote. Councillor Trollope.
Well, sorry, I don't have just one. I'll try, Chair. First of all, can I ask that we don't vote on the motion and the vote at the same time? Because I mean, I might be minded to support the application, but without this amendment.
That's happening.
Well, that's not what happened the last time, which kind of took me by surprise. And also, just in relationship to the point made earlier, I'm not certain I would feel comfortable basing my support for this plan based on the lack of objection from the outlying residents, given that the parish council has objected quite strongly to it. And there are many reasons why people may have not objected. It could be that they don't know, it could be that they are intimidated. There's lots of reasons why they might not have made any
Okay, thank you.
I think Councillor Trollope, the reason why we've considered in this instance we would do two separate votes is because an informative isn't part of the formal decision. An informative is just effectively a note to applicant, whereas a section 106 and conditions, etc., form part of the formal decision. So I think that's why we felt it was beneficial to split the two in this instance. So we are voting on the actual decision for one, and then a proposal to add a note to the applicant as a separate matter. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Take a vote on the informative, which is the committee feels that the development of the site has reached its full potential. We've had a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, all those in favour of that informative note being made to the applicants, please vote. All those in favour.
That's 6-4.
All those against?
Seven against.
And any abstentions? Thank you.
Two abstentions.
So therefore, therefore that proposal is not carried. Now moving to the vote on the recommendation to approve planning permission, subject to the appropriate conditions. All those in favour?
It's 12-4.
All those against?
And two against.
Any abstentions? Therefore, the application has been approved. Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 8, an urgent business. There's no urgent business from me. And I'd like to thank the officers and the members for their contribution this evening. And at 18:33, I bring the meeting to a close.